Yeah, that's it. This is all about prioritization, which comes down to a function called product management and looking at what's being asked and questioning, do these set of features represent a need in the bigger market? Is this something that is unique to customer A, or is this something I can find customer B, C, D for and use customer A as a good case study? It also, I think, comes down to the psychological relationship you have with your first few customers. If you turn into a dev shop unwittingly, the leverage is lost. They have a lot of pricing power over you, and it's scary. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we think about that. I think about that a lot. I completely agree with you, and it's hard because, especially when you're early stage, like, you need them using your product so you can build more product, so they can give you the case study, so you can go get more customers. Yeah. But so it's constantly a balance. This idea of we're customer driven, and they're helping us build our product, but we're not a consulting company, right? Like that's just not what we're doing.
If you don't have a startup yet and you're thinking of one, it's very beautiful to think, wow, I've got this major large customer that actually wants to work with me and I can build a product out for them. You'll be tearing your hair out and wishing you never started the company if you figure out, realize later, I'm so dependent on them, and ouch, like they could crush my business overnight. And I just am building features for them. I'm actually an underpaid consulting firm.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, again, what's the beauty of building software companies, right? The beauty is like you write one piece of code and you can deploy it to potentially hundreds of thousands of customers. If you're not doing that, like, then why start a software company? Like, that's the whole point, right?
The other thing is just say no, as you said, and learn to manage expectations, under promise, over deliver. That's really important. I think that one strategy with enterprises, if you're entering a crowded market, a really good way to enter the crowded market is to build around a few key customers and identify a niche that's not being served. Yeah. And carefully go after a segment that's being unaddressed or isn't being addressed well. Get those key customers and be careful. Don't go head to head for the flagship accounts, otherwise your competitors will crush you. They'll price you out. They'll do anything they can to retain the crown jewels. What you want to do is go after the segment of customers that your competitors are like, that wasn't really a valuable customer anyway. It was small for us. Well, you know what? Yeah. As they focus and retrench to the core of the market, you're capturing sort of the mid-tail and downstream. And before you know it, as those mid customers become large customers, they're your customers.
Yeah.
It's great. To add something else, and
I agree.
I'm sure you'll agree with this. The beautiful thing about having an enterprise customer is there's a lot more revenue to unlock. And once you're in and you've got that relationship, you can launch new products and features. You can easily test it out with them. You can get customer feedback. The beauty of having so few large customers is that you develop a tighter relationship with them. And there's opportunities for you to be what I would say is a preferred vendor, where you launch other products. It's much easier to get in. In some ways, the more enterprise customers you have, that's of strategic value. That's sometimes why acquisitions happen. The customer base that you have as a startup that you've built with these key customers, those relationships are very valuable to a potential acquirer. Something not to forget if you're an entrepreneur.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's especially like in the B2B and, like you said, enterprise space. It's so. The classic problem is like, well, why go after 10 clients when I can just get one who will pay me, 10 times what they'll pay me? Like, that's the classic problem. And it's especially when you're trying to hit quotas, right? Like that's what oftentimes people try to do. My belief is, again, one of our sort of core values of our company is to build for the long term, right? So what that means is not only build product for the long term, make long-term decisions when you're building product, don't make short-term ones. But that also means in terms of like how we think about customers. We don't think of them as, hitting quotas. We look at this customer, like you said, wherever they are on their sort of journey, right? And I will argue that there are some small customers who are further along in their data journey than the large guys, right? Wherever they are in their journey, if we can capture them and grow with them as they go through this journey, then we'll be their solution of choice. Or if one of them leaves, actually this has happened to us. Someone has left a company that was a customer of ours. They went to the new company and they said, "Oh, well, we should just use TermSheet. Like, I'm familiar with it, you know?"
Right, that's a massive driver, and that happens probably 1 year to 3 years out. A lot of people change jobs and they tend to work in the same industry, and those people who you maintain a relationship with become your evangelists. And to that point, one thing I see a lot of startups in the B2B and enterprise sales side miss is or get wrong is the importance of having the right ratio of account management or customer service to clients. And when you're budgeting, it's very easy to budget for sales and to budget for engineers. Yeah. You forget, hold on, you've bitten off more than you can chew. You're now spending time servicing these accounts, and there's often a ratio that's used in industries depending on your product. You know, it could be you have one account manager per X number of accounts, all a function of the product and revenue you're making from the clients.
Yeah. No, you're completely right. I mean, that's part of the problem too. I should say problem, the good problem as you're building your company. It's like, don't forget the things that got you there, right? Like your accessibility to clients, your willingness to hear their feedback, that only becomes or is just as important to the 100th client as it was to the first, right? Like they want the same thing. And so you have to build your business understanding that, right? You can't just forget like, oh, well, the 100th guy, we don't have to worry about him. He's just the 100th guy, you know?
And I found it quite difficult to balance when I was CEO of my startup and we had well over 100,000 customers. Some of these customers were bringing $10 to $50 million in revenue, so you can appreciate how important they were, right?
Yeah.
And one day, we couldn't even get, $100,000, and suddenly you've got a customer that, is bringing that much revenue for your company. It's fun and it's easy to and I highly recommend at the early stage, you just need to do everything, but to go out and go for the big guns and go get the big sales and focus on the big accounts, there is something to be said as a CEO or even as an executive, sitting down with your key clients every now and then, having sort of quarterly meetings and just chatting to them and trying to understand what is it you're trying to do. What are your problems? Let me put myself in your shoes. What are you trying to do? What are your strategic priorities? And then map back, how does my product help you do that? Yeah. And learning from key accounts what's working and isn't working is sometimes more important than just going in and giving a presentation and winning another sale. People bring in the CEO as the closer sometimes, right? When there's a key account.
Yeah.
That's fun and you need to do that, and you bring in a lot of revenue, and your sales team, you can really help them in that way. But you have to spend time with the whole segments of accounts and constantly trying to pattern match and understand, okay, I just heard this from this customer. Now let me take a note of that and bring that back to my product team. Now let me also see, does that feedback come up in other places too? Before you know it, you're back to startup phase. You're getting new ideas, you're seeing new trends happening, and that's how you beat someone who was just like you starting out in the basement somewhere. Those are the people you're afraid of when you're growing, right? Bill Gates used to say, I'm not worried about the major competitors. I'm worrying about someone like me who's sitting in a basement or garage somewhere and building their startup. They're the ones to be afraid of. And it's true. That turned out to be the case.
Can you elaborate on that more?
Yeah. So it's not your competitors that you see today that are dangerous for you. Okay. Sure. You even hinted to this. Some of the smaller customers can be more demanding. They have to be more demanding. They don't have that market cap. They don't have that big infrastructure. When a rocket ship is taking off, everyone gets credit for it, even though there's dead weight on the bus. Right? So in the same way, you've got to watch out for that tiny little startup that is on your market, looking at what you're doing, and they're out there gobbling up some of the market share. And that's the case for you as a founder when you're building your company, right? That startup, you got to remember this, you're not competing with that startup, okay? Even though you haven't made it to the big leagues, you're competing with that founder. Imagine there's someone as hungry as you. There's this saying, the wolf at the bottom of the hill is always hungry. I know you've never heard that before, but it's a childhood joke I had with a friend of mine. The wolf at the bottom of the hill is hungrier than the wolf at the top. It'll do anything to climb that hill. It's got more hustle and more hunger, right? Once you've made it and you've got millions of dollars in revenue, of course you've never made it, anything can happen, but you've got millions of dollars in revenue, when you're going to your customers, keep pretending you're that little baby startup and try to get signals from the market. Because that other founder over there is trying to get access to that market. You've already got access to that market. Start thinking about what's the next product we're going to build in a year? What does my roadmap look like 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months out? And I found, because I was so in touch with my key customers, I'd have an advantage versus another startup who would go finally get access to one customer. And I'm already aware of that startup, right? Which helps our corporate development pipeline, but also I'm getting way more feedback than that entrepreneur is. So as a CEO, as your company scales, you have got to put yourself into that mindset of, okay, what's the next iteration of this startup going to be? And I've got better access than any founder on the planet because I already had
That's an
customers.
amazing way to think about it. I mean, I think about customers and customer success and value, but I never have thought about it in the sense of, market that you already have access to that someone else is trying to get access to. That's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that.
And you also have superior access and you have superior ability to take that feedback. Think how hard it was for you to get a call or an introduction to a legitimate client and for you to be taken seriously. And even when you got through, you probably weren't even talking to the decision maker. You weren't even talking to the end user or customer. Well, my friend, once you've grown your startup and you've got some paying accounts, wow. They're an asset for you. So keep being a startup. Never lose sight of that. And that's, I think, why Bill Gates and others were always worried about not the major competitors, but that small hustler who's trying to go, after that market. They're the dangerous ones.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's like you think about key decision makers, and that's something that you run into when you're doing B2B as well, right? Like you might be talking to someone because you know them, you have a relationship with them, or however that might be, and they may actually get you in the door, but oftentimes the sale may not work because ultimately you were talking to the wrong person, right? Like that other person who is that key decision maker might actually be doing their own thing, right? Like they might be running the same process on their own. And so I would say it's really important to, leverage those relationships to get in, but then as quickly as possible, try to get to the key decision maker. I mean, you hear it, but we live it, because they're the ones that are ultimately, going to decide whether this pilot, whatever it is going to succeed or fail,
Exactly. Prioritization, knowing who you're talking to, making sure you have a really solid sales approach, you have good follow-up activities, and you build a relationship, and eventually you will score that sale. You have to work at it. There were accounts I worked on for years and years, and I finally got them. And I got them big, and they became big accounts. And sometimes, you need case studies, you need marketing enablement, you need to work many angles. Sometimes if it's a big company, you need to work 10 different people in the company.
Yeah.
And then you got to also be worried about another thing. Turnover can hurt you too. The decision maker you were talking to has been replaced. And often, why is it the politics of a big company? The new person comes in and wants to change everything. And that might mean you too. That might mean getting rid of the vendor. So, you gotta really, build a sticky solution so that your product lives on beyond the decision maker being there and the power builder being there.
I'll ask you this question. I'm kind of interested in what your answer would be. So, there's this approach of selling to large enterprises of, sort of enterprise-wide deployments, right? Where I'd be interested to see if you saw this at Bungle. So, where in order for the company to adopt your platform, it has to be deployed across the entire organization, as opposed to this, what I would call maybe this is the wrong analogy in this day and age, but like a virus kind of model where you can get one group that it's sort of less pressure to make that decision, but get one group, have them adopt it, and then they can become evangelists throughout the organization. Oftentimes, especially in real estate, like different geographic groups or asset class groups are kind of their own profit center, so they do have the ability to make these decisions on their own. But how did you think about that when you were selling to these large companies? Was it like a organization wide, or was it like
rarely? Even today, still not the case. Portfolio wide deployments and rollouts are hard to get. most companies are risk averse to trying new solutions and want rollouts that are carefully staged and managed. And it definitely is easier to go and get one group within the company to be your evangelist, and then to use that group to champion you internally. So that's the safest approach. I'm not saying you can't get those big portfolio-wide deployments. You want to get LPC's entire real estate portfolio. Okay, it comes down to how the company's structured. Very rarely are conglomerates structured so centrally. Disney used to have like a strategic planning unit that would really have a say in everything that rolls out operationally. And when Bob Iger, the previous CEO of Disney, when he came in, he really dissolved that group and gave power to each leader. Now, on this theme, over the last decade, we have seen a shift in marketing and technology budgets. It used to be in the hands of the CFO. It's now more in the hands of the divisional leaders and the CTO and CMO. The CTO and CMO nowadays are controlling more and more of the spend, and the CFO has a lot less power there. And the CMO, I would argue, as well, has a lot of power in making technology decisions. And even the sales team now has decisions. And the role of the IT function internally is diminishing and is becoming somewhat redundant. IT is now being relegated to overall infrastructure and security and onboarding employees and setting them up and things like that. So if that's happening, you've got to realize that each department might have its own budget, and sometimes it's annoying. You might already have a contract with the company, but it's like you're starting from scratch. The right hand and the left hand sometimes don't even talk to each other. Right. Let me bring this to real estate as an example. I'll give you one example. There's so many configurations. In multifamily, you're talking to a fund like Bluefield, right? You might think it's so easy for us to deploy a technology solution throughout all of our portfolios. Hell no. No, like we have different third-party managers. We have Greystar managing a bunch of properties. We have AMC. We have other vendors. We have smaller property management firms. And even then, in that property management firm, you've got different regional managers. So for me to deploy a hardware solution or a tenant communication platform or whatever it might be, in one part of the portfolio within that property manager, it's a lot of work to have it work in 3 properties and then roll that out to 5 or 6. It does tend to be like a virus, but it doesn't spread as viral as a virus does, In fact, sometimes you might secure that one that is going really well, and for some reason it doesn't spread. So you've got to be a chess player when you're in an enterprise game. You've really got to, I think you're the one that sort of brought it up. You've got to know who the decision maker is, and you've got to really research, and you're playing a chess game here. Also, you want to be, you don't have this luxury all the time. But you want to choose who your key contact's going to be. And as a CEO, I found, so this is more for founders and CEOs here, be very strategic with which level you build the relationship at. So I used to have my sales team account. We had hundreds of salespeople. We had hundreds of millions in revenue. So I know it's a different scale. But this did start to happen in the early days where I would only try to come in, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant here, okay? Don't get me wrong, right? But it's what your job is as a CEO. You have to come in and be used a certain way. My sales team wouldn't let me take meetings sometimes with lower level sales people on the other side. Especially in Asia, it was very important that rank was respected. And I also found when I came in too heavy as a CEO and there's junior salespeople from the other side, they wouldn't say a word. They would just say the product's great, you wouldn't get the truth. So what I found worked well was sort of a configuration where the sales team would bring me into the boss of their contact. So the sales team can't go higher than director level, right? So now they arrange a meeting jointly where our sales team and our contact at the client would get me a meeting with the SVP. Yeah. Right? And the SVP is willing to take that meeting. Now that's very important. You go establish a relationship with that SVP. Don't get stuck at the lower level. Let your sales team manage that lower level. Now you've got the relationship. So if anything happens, the SVP is going to call you. It happened to me many times. I'm getting a text message like, hey, we're unhappy with your product. We're probably going to switch you out. I'm like, whoa, okay. Like, give me a chance here, let me see what's happening. And sometimes the SVP would give me a notice before they would even give it a notice to the lower level people.
Oh, wow.
So this is the world of enterprise. You see, this is the world of B2B, something that people don't appreciate. Once you go in, there's a whole politics. Use your role as a CEO, executive, or founder. There are some customers that you want to have a contact with at the lowest level because they're going to give you true feedback. But there are other accounts where you really have to get a CEO to CEO relationship going. And sometimes it's a 2-hour meeting and you're going out to eat and you're doing all the fun stuff people envy CEOs for doing. You're golfing, you're whining and dining. And at the very end, if it comes up, how's business? It's going great. Oh, by the way, there was this one issue. No worries, we'll sort it out. Your people talk to my people. That's literally what it used to be like as you scale a company. It's fun. I'll tell you, it's a fun thing, right? But it's deliberate. In enterprise, you have to do it like that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, I'm not that we're out yet whining and dining, hopefully one day, but
you need to start doing that. I really think you need to start doing that, because here's the thing you need to remember, right? It's not about your revenues. Founders have a lot of respect for founders. CEOs have a lot of respect for other CEOs. It's normal and it's okay and it's approachable. Or not approachable, it's appropriate for you to ask for a meeting with the CEO of the enterprise company.
Yeah.
Well, set your sights high. If not the CEO, the divisional leader, and come in and get respect. And once you're seen as an equal, and this is all about the dynamics too, right? You don't want to be a slave. You don't want to be a dev shop, as we said in one of the earlier segments here. Go in and establish yourself as an equal, and it'll move mountains for your company.
Yeah.
You got to know how to play that.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. It's just fun. It like you said, or like we said earlier, in some respects, starting a B2B company, there's a lot of advantages, right? Because you can have a well-defined problem, you can work in a niche, you know who your customers are. But then when you start going into things like this, well, okay, now you have to maintain those clients. You have to ensure you're talking to the right people. So on the front end, I wouldn't say easier. I'm definitely not saying I don't want to use that word, but it's on the back end, you kind of have to deliver on that promise, right? Whereas oftentimes people think about consumer, it's like, okay, well, yeah, it's really hard up front to get enough people. But then if you can do it and that one product hits, then it's like, okay, well, I can just build this sort of one product and kind of keep going. It's just, my point is like it never really stops, right? Like it doesn't stop.